A little while ago, I made a short lesson all about how you can extend your answers in IELTS speaking. It used a method called the REE method, Respond, Elaborate, Example. It was a very popular video on YouTube, on TikTok, and on Instagram. So in today's lesson, I want to tell you a bit more about how you can use the REE method to boost your IELTS speaking score. So I've got a question for you. How long should your answers be in IELTS speaking? What do you think? Should they be under 10 seconds? Should they be between 10 and 30 seconds? Or should they all be over 30 seconds? Well, I would argue that it depends. Sometimes you'll have short answers, sometimes you'll have medium length answers, and sometimes you'll have long answers. What about for a question like this? Is it important for people to have time off from work? So if you were answering this in your native language with a friend, perhaps you would give a short answer. You could just say, yes, it's very important. But in the IELTS test, we really need to show off our language. The examiner needs to be able to see a large sample of your speaking. So as a result, with a question like this, you typically give a longer answer, so over 30 seconds. What about this one? What can I call you? At the beginning of the speaking test, the examiner might say, what can I call you? Would you give a short, a medium, or a long answer? Okay, for this question, I think you should give a short answer, just something like, you can call me Eli. What about this one? What is your routine at the weekend? Short, medium, or long? Okay, a question like this, I'd give a medium or long answer. I want to show the examiner that I can give a detailed answer and explain my routine on Saturday and Sunday. What about this? Do you work or study? If you've done the IELTS test, chances are you've already been asked this question. It's the most common question in the IELTS speaking test. Okay, if you get a question like this, you can just give a medium length answer. Just something like, I'm an English teacher. I've been working as an English teacher for the last 13 years. Okay, so order these questions from shortest to longest answers. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the shortest, which one? Okay, what can I call you? You're just going to give maybe a one-word answer. Number 2, do you work or study? Remember, this is a very common question, and typically the examiner needs to ask these introductory questions quite quickly so that they can get on to further questions. So if you give a long answer at this stage, chances are the examiner is going to interrupt you, which might be a little bit awkward for starting the test. Next, we've got what is your routine at the weekend? And then finally, is it important for people to have time off from work? Now, what's the difference between these first 3 questions and this final question? I'd say that these questions here are giving information, whereas this one is giving an opinion. Now, when we're asked questions where we need to give an opinion, this is when we can use the REE method. Remember, REE is respond, elaborate, example. Let me show you an example. Okay, is it important for people to have time off from work? Definitely. If people don't take time off, it's much more likely that they'll experience burnout, frustration at work, and they may even be less productive. Okay, and then we have the example. For example, when I worked in Spain, I had a manager who never took time off. She would come to work even if she was clearly ill. She thought it showed resilience. However, all that happened was that she became snappy and easily agitated. I think she would have done her work a lot better if she had taken time off every so often. Okay, the REE method, respond, elaborate, example. Have a look at this, memorize it. What appeared in this space? Can you remember? The answer is definitely. Okay, so definitely is a very useful term when we want to respond. We can agree, we can partially agree, or we can disagree. So definitely is in the agree category. What else can we say when we want to respond to the question? Remember, this is just going to be a short phrase. Well, we can say things like totally, completely, for sure, certainly, yes. If we want to partially agree, we can say things like to an extent, I suppose, well, I partly agree, but, or in theory, yes, but in practice. This is a very advanced way to respond to a question. Then sometimes you are going to disagree. You can say things like definitely not, I totally disagree, I completely disagree, I wouldn't say that. Actually, I don't think so, or just no. Okay, take a second, try and memorize these phrases. Remember, if you want, you can always email me and I'll send you the PowerPoint slides for this. Okay, so agree. Well, what did we have in this space here? For something. We've got for sure. Okay, take another second to memorize all of these. What did we have in this space? Can you remember? I suppose. Okay, now looking at the disagree ones, what did we have in this space? I totally disagree. Okay, a difficult one here. What do we have in these two spaces? Can you remember? In theory, yes, but in practice. And then you'd have to explain why something is a good idea in theory, but actually in practice, it's not such a good idea. Okay, let's go back to our REE method answer, and you'll notice there's a gap here. What was the word that fit into this space? It's if. So let's look at some different ways to elaborate on our answer. Well, a good way is to have a conditional sentence like the one we used. If people don't take time off, it's much more likely that they'll experience burnout, frustration at work, and they may even be less productive. So great, we can use conditionals when we want to elaborate on our answers. There are some other methods or grammar terms that we can use. We can have some comparisons, like the healthier and happier we are, the more productive we will be at work. We can also use gerunds. So gerunds are when we have a verb that acts as a noun. We often have this at the beginning of a sentence, and I'll show you in a second. Working too much leads to burnout. Now you might be thinking, well, what is a gerund? Why have you underlined this ing? So the word work is usually used as a verb, right? I work on Tuesday. So work is the verb. However, in this sentence, work is not the verb. Leads to is the verb. So we're using work instead as a noun, and when we use a verb as a noun in English, we turn it into a gerund, which means it has ing. Working too much leads to burnout. Okay, we can also use modals. People who work too much may miss out on an important family time. So may miss, or could miss, or might miss. We can use different modal verbs, and that's a good way to elaborate on your answer. Okay, let's go back to our REE method answer, and what was in this space here? Respond, elaborate, example. For example, a very useful way to introduce examples. Remember, examiners love examples. They love it in the writing test especially because it shows topic development, but they also love examples in speaking because it shows a higher level of fluency and coherence, because you are being linear and extending your answers out. So, for example, is a great phrase to use in the exam. So let's look at some vocabulary for giving examples, because we shouldn't just say, for example, over and over again. We certainly can use for example, and I'd recommend that. For example, working too many hours may lead to chronic fatigue. Chronic fatigue means fatigue lasting a long time and unlikely to be cured. However, we should also vary the way that we introduce examples. We can use phrases like, for instance. For instance, a friend of mine who worked too hard eventually burned out. We can use such as. People who work too hard may experience symptoms such as exhaustion. And we can also use like. people who work too hard may experience symptoms like high blood pressure. Okay, that's all I wanted to show today. I wanted to explain a bit more about the REE method. A good idea is to practice this before your speaking test. Perhaps you can do it with a study partner, or if you don't have a study partner, you can use it with some sort of AI chatbot, or even just writing out your answers and then speaking them into the mirror. But good luck using the REE method, and I hope it gets you the IELTS score that you're looking for. Best of luck with your studies, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye.